Queen, LizJSimpson here. Welcome to another episode of Women Consulting Corporate. And I am on cloud 9 today because I have an amazing special guest here today that I've had the joy of working with for a little bit over a year. And I think what's special about today's episode is that so many of you have businesses that maybe they aren't fulfilling you anymore, or maybe you are serving the consumer space and you're looking to pivot and serve corporate clients. And today's guest is just a perfect embodiment of possibility and shifting to build a business that aligns with what you want out of life. So today we have the Desiree Booker, who's founder and CEO of ColorVizion Lab, an inclusive employer branding firm. Welcome, 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 Desiree.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you so much.
It's a joy. Tell me more. Okay, so first and foremost, when people hear inclusive employer branding firm, can you tell them what that means and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So ultimately, we augment, complement, and accelerate in-house DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, and human resources teams with a focus on talent branding projects. So all of our consulting surrounds the employer brand. So how do we develop an employer brand and employee experience that attracts and retains marginalized talent for our clients?
I love that. How did you find yourself in that space? Like, how did you identify there was a problem or need there?
Well, my corporate background is in corporate communications and diversity recruitment. I worked at MSNBC, Nickelodeon, several large brands before I went full-time in my company in 2019. And at the time, I was a career coach. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people who work in talent acquisition, you tend to engage a lot of job seekers and find your way into career coaching. I actually know a lot of people who have made that transition. And I was helping my clients to land fulfilling careers and realized that the impact wasn't great enough working with the clients. And we needed to do something to impact the workplaces in which they were in. Didn't know how to do that. DEI was such a huge umbrella. There were so many different things that fell under the diversity and inclusion umbrella. Anti-racism wasn't my thing. I didn't want to do conscious inclusion trainings or anything like that. And so I think that it took me a while to even realize that in my corporate roles, what I was doing was employer branding, but it wasn't a thing back when I was in corporate. So it probably took me a year to even figure out what we were doing, like what our unique value proposition was. But there's a whole story in itself as to how I went from the career coach to being in this role now.
I love it. And with employer branding, for someone who's learning like value propositions and how to share insights with corporations or align with what their goals are, why would an organization care about employer branding on their side?
Sure. Well, the employer branding piece, it really impacts the entire employee life cycle. So when you think about employer branding, it's the attraction piece, it's the candidate experience, it's the onboarding experience, it's once they become an employee, how are we providing an experience that lives up to what they were sold during the hiring process, and ultimately engage them in that employer brand. And when we think about employer brand, at the core of it is really your culture, your values. When I think of some of my own values, I'm thinking about autonomy, having people work in their zones of genius, authenticity, emotional intelligence. Those things are really core values to me. And I make sure that I communicate that whenever I'm hiring so that I'm attracting candidates who have the best chance of succeeding working with me, because ultimately it's about alignment, right? So everyone's not going to do well in your workplace, and that's okay. You don't need to be for everyone, but the messaging needs to be clear because people want to know what they're getting into before they apply to work with you, and they want that experience in the workplace to match what they believe to be true as a candidate.
100%. Mm-hmm. Girl, I can't tell you how many jobs I had, but I was like, this is fraud.
The switcheroo, right?
Like, y'all got me. This is not what you said this culture was. Mm-hmm. Listen, some people have great branding and poor experience in culture. I'm like, oh yeah, this is not, there's no alignment here. So I love that someone like yourself is on the front lines.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Listen, it is much needed. So let's talk about then your personal business journey. So before we met, you were a career coach What were some of the things, like what was happening with you that you now went from this space of career coach to leading just this amazing consulting firm?
So when I started career coaching full time in 2019, we launched a series of digital products and coaching programs, and ultimately led to our first high ticket coaching program that we launched in 2021. And we had done so well in 2020 with our various, programs for women. And so I just knew that this high ticket program was going to be, it's going to take our business to the next level.
Girl, yeah.
And, because that's what's buzzing around in the coaching world, right? So you're like, I need a high ticket program. So, worked really hard on that, invested a lot of money. And when I launched it, it was not as successful as I would have hoped, but I think my optimism did not stop there. So we tried a lot of different marketing and sales strategies over about maybe 6 or 7 months. And we were just getting by. Like the math wasn't mathing. When you look at the numbers, it wasn't working out. And so I got to a point where I really had to sit in stillness and just think about what was broken, what are we not doing right? And then it started to become a bit of a spiritual conversation. I wouldn't consider myself religious, but I do have a very intimate connection with God. And so I started to feel a little bit disconnected from my work. It started to feel like a chore to show up online. I was exhausted by organic marketing, showing up on Instagram, doing all those reels and stuff. And we didn't have the revenue to really invest in paid advertising. So I had already been consulting kind of on the side. So let me add that while we were doing the coaching, I was able to land a smaller contract in 2020 from LinkedIn Content Marketing. And that was an employer brand contract. Okay. And I just let it go. So once the contract was over, I had no way to continue that engagement, to grow the relationship. It was just done.
Right.
And so while I was at this turning point, I thought that I might do consulting full time, but to be honest, I was scared because I was afraid to own my identity in that space. Everyone knew me as a career coach. I was well respected in that space, and I got results for my clients. So to then rebrand myself and come out and emerge as someone completely different, and also in a space where people who are my age, who look like me, I guess I didn't feel like I had enough experience. So it took a lot of mindset work to get through that, to even make the decision that I was going to go through the rebranding process and the repositioning process to get here. So I'll stop there because I know you got some follow-up questions.
No, I'm tearing up. So you're good. I literally was tearing up thinking like, it breaks my heart that so many brilliant women ever question, are they ready? Like, how I feel about you. Like, and I hope you know that my words are real. I think the world of you. So for there to have ever been a season that you questioned if you were ready, just like breaks my heart. But she ready now.
She ready now. She ready now. Yes.
So I know you good now. So no, keep going. So you're in that space now. And for the woman listening, then what type of steps did you have to take to shift from, I'm not sure, I need more experience, to who you are today? Like, what does that spiritual or mindset journey look like?
Yeah. A lot of meditation, a lot of reading. One book in particular, or 2 books rather, that I read during that time. One was The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. I read it every time I'm about to do something big and scary. The other book was Believe Bigger by Marshawn Evans Daniels. And those 2 books really pushed me through. And then being in your coaching program. So I had been following you on Instagram for a while, and I knew that at some point I would end up in what used to be the big money movement. But I was just waiting for the right time. And being in the community that you had created for women like me, it was all the encouragement that I needed and the reinforcement that I was doing the right thing. I think that was really the theme, is wondering, like, am I making the right choices? Is
Yeah.
this the right decision? I didn't have any money to lose. So, I mean,
Yep.
at that point I was like, this has to work.
Right.
So, I think that, so the books, being involved in the big money movement, and just really being tired of where I was just like, when something is broken for me and I'm feeling dissatisfied and I'm feeling, I don't know, it's just like, you don't want to waste time. I knew that there was something bigger and better that God was calling me to do. And I was disobedient for a really long time. And I feel like God will really break you down to the lowest levels until
Girl,
he has
play
your
with it if you
attention.
want to.
Right. It's fierce,
Girl, like he will lose everything
Yeah.
playing around.
That's what it was feeling like. I was like, when is this going to end? Like, what is going on? So I was like, you know what? It's just time to go ahead and fully transition. So I started to plant some seeds. Towards, I would say, Q4 of 2021, I was planting seeds, going back to old clients and starting to gradually rebrand. I was starting to phase out my coaching clients, and finish that process January 2022. And there was a point. So January through March was pretty rough. I had some opportunities in the pipeline that didn't work out. And I think I got down to maybe my last like $4,000. And I was like, something has got to shake next
Yep.
month. And out of nowhere, in maybe April or May, I got an email from Golan, which was my very first consulting client. And they were offering me a contract with an immediate start date for a project that was in total alignment with where I was taking the company. And that project turned into my biggest consulting engagement to date, which was a $250,000 project, through a referral. So that it was just, I'm going back in my head and thinking about the power of making decisions and the power of taking action. Because in 2020, when I had that contract, I was so scared. I almost did not take the project with Golan because I was intimidated by the contractual process. I was intimidated by the negotiation process. I felt like a small fish and I was in over my head, and I almost backed out and just said, this is not for me. Had I said no to that, I don't even know if I would have been able to do what I've done this year. And so 2 years later, that was the one opportunity that set me up to be able to scale my business as much as I have this year.
That's crazy.
Everything is, it's just like everything is divinely ordered.
Divine, yes.
So it's, I don't know, it's just, being here feels very surreal. It's just the difference a year could make. I think that people really underestimate how much your life can change with 30 days of commitment, consistency, 90 days of commitment, imperfect action, as you always say, doing the work and committing to it, your life can change. And that happened for me. I said 2022 was going to be harvest season. Didn't I say that in January? I said it was going to be harvest season. Yes, and it was.
Oh my gosh. I get chills to think about it because there's so much you're sharing that resonates with me, and I appreciate your candor about it. I mean, about just the intimidation that happens even in the contractual process, the process of securing a corporate client. There's a lot there. The idea of like, who am I? Like little old me? Like, really? Is this for me? Like, and counting ourselves out of opportunities. Like, we'll be at the table and say, no, just even in the program, we have women who apply, they get approved, they join, and then literally get in and say, do I belong here? Right? It's like that fear that shows up. And then you saying that just how your life can change with 30 days of massive imperfect action. Like, it's just, if you can just be scared for a season and do the things and plant the seeds, and for you to have a relationship to come full circle which I hope has opportunity to expand from here, right?
Yes, it does. I mean, we
Did
not.
y'all see that smile?
They love us. It's such a great partnership. We are working on some incredible projects for Black Greek Letter Org students and HBCU students, and it's just total alignment. And I know that that's going to end up being a partnership that is mutually beneficial for a long term, kind of the long term kind of thing. So I feel great about that, and I think that, I mean, obviously the financial pieces of it is great, but having aligned clients was the most important thing to me, because I had a client before that was just not aligned, and I ended up having to part ways with that client. It was taking way too much of my energy. It just the communication wasn't good. It just felt like it wasn't a fit.
Okay.
And so having aligned partners, I found, is very important. So to me, that's a big win too.
For someone listening, right, when they have a client that's not aligned, what are some of the signs and how do you navigate that? Because I don't want to gloss over that, because that's not easy.
Yes, man. So I think the first sign was, it just felt uncomfortable every time we had meetings. Like, it just felt like the communication was broken down. It didn't feel like we had ever reached a good cadence, a working cadence. Usually after the first 60 days to 90 days, you should get in a flow with the client, and, things shouldn't feel as bumpy, but we just never got into a good flow with this client. She was always saying that we didn't understand what she was communicating to us in terms of deliverables. There was a lot of scope creep, which is essentially when the agreed upon deliverables that you have for a project, you end up over delivering, sometimes under delivering. So it just felt like we could never be on the same page. And there was one situation, we had a meeting with this client, and the lead on that side, she had disrespected us. She kind of had a temper tantrum on the meeting.
Okay.
And it was completely inappropriate. And there were some things said that, really undermined our credibility. And at that point, I said, there's no way we can continue this. And so disrespect is just a no go.
Right.
So we had to part ways after that. Yeah. And honestly, I think just my peace of mind, honestly. I just don't want to stress myself out unnecessarily. I mean, there's already a high degree of stress being in the consulting world. Add insult to injury with a client that's kind of, you call them PETA clients. Girl. So I don't have time for those. So
it's interesting for me. I don't know, and I won't project onto you, but I've had some really relationships go sour. And what's been interesting for me is I'm always looking back at how can I reverse engineer what went wrong? Like, what were the warning signs, so that when I'm looking forward to clients, how do I know this is a cultural fit and they're already showing up the way that I want them to or need them to? And what's been interesting is I've had, there's two clients that come to mind where the relationship went sour because they were disrespectful in the end. And what's been interesting for me is that when things have gone south and they've been disrespectful and power dynamics have shifted, it's interesting to see how people treat me with certain power dynamics, right? So how do I say this a different way? So clearly I'm talking in code. There have been times where when a client, these two clients, they've gone south, that they've said things that I'm like, I think there's some bias that's showing up in how you're communicating with me. And as long as I was doing things the way you wanted me to do them, you would communicate a certain way. But the moment the relationship went south, it's almost like the veil came off and the boxing gloves were off. And one of the things that I appreciate about being an entrepreneur, to your point, is having the discernment and ability to say, no, thank you. Exactly. I don't need to be in a toxic environment where your bias, I call it your slip is going to be showing. And so I love that you're able to leave, but I also want to give voice to those who are listening, because I don't think we talk enough as consultants about things can go south, right? And you can work with clients who have toxic environments or poor personalities, and people will say some wild and crazy mess to you. Like you really think I'm your child or something.
Right.
you really think I'm your child? So I'm glad that you said no to that. And I think that's the freedom and power of leading your own firm, is being able to go. And I'm hearing a little bit that what they said wasn't just something that you heard, and that maybe your team was exposed to something. And I love that you had the discernment to say, my team is not going to be exposed to that.
Yeah, it was definitely an attack on my team, the core consulting team. And I had to think about, how would I be perceived as a leader if I didn't make the decision? I mean, all money is not good money.
It sure ain't.
Well, how would they lose faith in me as a leader? Would they even want to continue to work for me if I'm just like chasing dollars at any expense? So yes, that's very important.
Love it. Love it. I'm sad that happened, but I'm glad that it created space for other opportunities and more to come. So tell me about what you're most excited about right now. What are some things, I kind of know, but tell them some things that are cooking and what you're excited about.
Yes. Well, recently I was able to hire my first full-time employee, which has been a game changer for me. We have a full-time account executive that I'm onboarding right now. And that in itself has been a huge marker, because I was very burnt out throughout the transition, because while you're pivoting a business, you end up being a lot more hands-on and involved than you would hope, until you have a good foundation and you're able to delegate. You can't delegate something to someone if you don't know how to do it yourself.
Right. Say that.
Right. So that was a big thing, and I think it was big because I am moving into a new chapter in my personal life. I have put my personal goals on the back burner for 3 years, in terms of wanting to buy a home for myself, wanting to get married, starting to family plan. And those are things that I'm just not willing to put on the back burner anymore. So team building was a huge priority for me. And even having the mindset shift to allocate a portion of my revenue to be responsible for someone's salary, like that in itself.
Like, I could just take all of this, though. This could all be mine.
Right. So that was a big thing. So yeah, we got our first enterprise contract this year. It was a multi-billion-dollar client, and going through the procurement process, I thought I had the mindset issues kind of in check, but having our attorneys go back and forth, like having to get my attorney involved, was something that was a little bit newer for me. Going in terms of the invoicing process, companies wanted to pay net 60, net 90.
Girl, you have to advocate for yourself.
You do. Yes. So that was a big piece. And there was a lot of systemic issues, kind of, not to say that it wasn't the client's fault, but you could just tell that they were used to dealing with firms that were much larger, had more resources, were not minority owned, were not woman owned. It was almost like an education process. And I had to tell them what I needed in order to be able to render services. And so being able to stand up for myself and my company to do that, we got net 30. That was a big thing.
Now. That's huge. That's huge.
So it was just goodness. You said it yourself. You have to advocate. You have to ask for what you need and what you want. And a lot of times we get in our heads about, thinking someone's doing something to us and trying to take away from us. But these companies, a lot of them are just used to working with larger organizations.
Yes.
And that's just kind of how it is. So
I love it. That is such a teachable moment. I'm so excited for you. I just got to break down a little bit of this. So if you all aren't familiar, when you're working with larger enterprise companies in their procurement department, net 90 is like you invoice and they have 90 days to pay on that invoice, right? And that doesn't even mean you're getting that money in 90 days. That means they can cut the check and process within 90 days, which means you could be waiting more than 3 months for your payment. And so what happens, to Desiree's point, is that those processes are in place, but that's why so many organizations have supplier diversity divisions and things of that nature, to advocate for small businesses, because the average small business can go out of business waiting 3 to 4 months for you to pay for services. So one of the things that we talk about a lot with our clients is, don't take things as face value. Advocate for yourself. Let them know that you're a small business. And oftentimes you'll find someone within the organization that can meet you
Yes.
So with the redlining and attorneys, how many months did that take? Like for contracts, let's just give them the real.
So you know what, when clients, so with this particular client, they needed the services yesterday. So,
of course.
it's like you're balancing, the conversations with procurement and supplier diversity, and then you have the partners in the business. So the people who say, all right, I want to give you this contract. I want you to provide these services for my team. They don't have anything to do with the contract or the check. They just want you to render the services. So it really is a delicate dance between, like, you have to really please both parties, because when you get into a company supply chain and you do a good job, they will feed you. They will feed you contracts over and over again.
For a lifetime, girl. For a lifetime, they'll feed you.
Absolutely. And so that process surprisingly was only about 45 days. So that was short.
That's not bad. I know people who are in contracts for 3-4 months. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the negotiation process was like 45 days.
Okay.
So, but there were weekly conversations going back and forth. And I mean, there was this one piece just about even like data protection and things like that, like putting together cybersecurity programs. Is so many things that you don't think about that you need. It's like you have to have money to play big, right? So, and that's where the imposter syndrome comes in, because you're like, I don't have $20K just in my back pocket to build a cybersecurity program just for this one client.
Contract, yep.
But that's what they're expecting. So that piece was a little bit nerve-wracking, but once we got past it, things were pretty smooth. Okay.
I love it. I love it. And people don't always have to start there, right? Like you have paid your dues.
Yes.
You have paid your dues and expanded, and I'm elated for you to have that. Tell me more about, so with the Big Money Movement, that is now the 12% Accelerator, but formerly known as the Big Money Movement. Tell me just like what, I'm hearing that it really was affirming. Like, this is affirmation that I'm meant to be here. I can play in this space. I can trust my gut. But for someone who's considering it, what was some of the value or insights that you gleaned even from the community that helped you in that season?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think this is kind of a cliche saying, but if you can't see it, you can't achieve it. And so a big part of my transition was being around people who were achieving it, because I could not see it for myself, because I didn't see anyone else around me doing what I wanted to do. And so being in a community where there are women around you who have multi-6-figure, 7-figure businesses, who look like me, it made it more achievable to me. It made it feel doable. And so that was the kind of the Kickstarter that I needed to actually put one foot in front of the other and do the work. Having you and your team review my proposals, let me take a step back, because my proposals were trash before I joined your program. They were trash, Liz. Like literally. And I'm thinking about some feedback I got on my proposals from like prospects, and I get why I got some of that feedback, because they were a mess. So when it came to learning how to calculate the value of the investment, like that took me a while to learn how to do, to make basically make the project a seamless yes, because you're showing the value in the proposal. So that proposal framework, that is worth the investment alone. So that piece was big. Being able to speak to your team with the homework audits and the weekly coaching, it was really a huge source of accountability, and understanding how to set tangible KPIs and back into those. So understanding the sales activities and the prospecting, everything I would need to do in order to reach whatever revenue goal we set. Didn't know how to do that. But you'll find that I feel like in the coaching world, you run into the same people over and over again. So like I had a lot of friends who I had been in other programs with who had joined this one, and it was just a really supportive community. But I could talk all day about, the lessons, the worksheets, the coaching, but it was just really being in proximity to women who were doing this for real. Like it wasn't just like, these aren't little businesses, play businesses. These are real businesses, right? You know about the play businesses. These are real businesses, right? Right? We are building sustainable businesses. So I wanted to be around those women. I want to align to those women, not the ones who are wasting time on the things that don't really matter.
Yeah.
So I think, what was it, 12 months that I was in the program? I started to get an ROI, I would say, after like the first 60 days. Wow. But right around month 6 is when things kind of like really took off. So I've already sent you 2 people, and I'm going to keep sending people.
Keeps sending them. I am thankful. They say that's the biggest compliment, right, is a referral. So that I do not take that lightly, right? And I'm continually rooting for you. And I know the other thing that I really respect and appreciate about you is like from my perspective as an outsider, it's like I see you shifting your entire environment, right? Like the way you move in your life. So even outside of our community, if someone's looking to consult, what other resources or programs might you speak to? If someone's like, when you learn something new, you're like, all right, where else do I need to go to absorb like free game on this or opportunities? Are there any other resources that you might recommend?
Well, to be honest, Liz, when it comes to the consulting piece, corporate consulting, like you have the best program in the industry, in my opinion. I don't know any other programs out there that have just this comprehensive end-to-end framework that, it covers everything. So I don't know if I could recommend another program for corporate contracting, but I am currently working with Tatiana O'Hara. She has a program called Grindaholics Anonymous. So I'm going to plug her because she has helped me to shift from solopreneur to business owner and build my team, build my values, the vision for the company, the stuff that makes the company sustainable, So that I will plug her.
She coming to the 12% too anyway. So yes, plug her. She coming.
I like to keep the money in the circle, Thank you. But honestly, those have been the 2 biggest investments for me over the course of the last 2 years. I think investing is something I'm going to allocate budget for in terms of coaching and things like that every single year. It's important to me, but it's just based on what the need is for that year. So next year, so we got our minority owned certifications this year.
Okay.
Next year, I'm going to be looking into government. So that's a whole different beast. So we'll see.
Yes. Government. At some point, that's something like when I think of my vision that I would like to expand. I don't know. I mean, it takes so much to get someone to the corporate side, and government is just a whole nother ball game. But the spend is insane. I'll just drop this for y'all. I went to the NMSDC conference for the first time in New Orleans, and so the federal government is the largest buyer in the world, and they had. Last year was a record amount of spend. They spent 11% with small businesses. And, only because I'm going to mess up the number now, but that 11% ended up equating to like $17 billion with Black-owned businesses. And from the narrative, it was like they exhausted so many resources just to stretch to spend 11% because that was historic. They never did it before. But the goal is to get to 16% spend in the next 2 years. So they are trying to become more resourceful than ever to get that money out to like small businesses. So there's so much money available. And in the conversations that I had, really the gap for them is making sure that businesses know about the opportunities, they're positioned for the opportunities, and they seem to be aware that it's intimidating. You think corporate's intimidating? Yeah. Government is like a whole nother ball game. So there's so much opportunity there, and I'm ecstatic that your business is gonna start to collect some of that.
As you kind of, peel back those layers, and go into that space, please let me know.
Girl,
let's resource share.
Together.
Yes, please.
Learn together.
Yes, because the thought of just trying to, getting the certifications in the first place for a private sector, a lot of people don't do that because of how intimidating it is. It took me a year to get my woman-owned business certification. WeBank and NMSDC, we got that one. That was a little bit quicker, but once you get in, you got to know how to navigate it and work it. It is a completely different world, and I'm seeing a lot of people ask, do you need it? Do you not? Yeah. If you want to go after big corporate, you need it.
Yep.
You need it. It's I would say that pretty much every company we're prospecting for next year, like they have these supplier diversity programs, and there's a lot of benefits on their end of working with certified, businesses, but they all ask if you're certified. Yeah, so if you don't have those certs, I would say start working on them ASAP.
You definitely need to. And one of the things I think about, so our challenge in our program, just to talk about it candidly, because I know people wonder about this, is like when I built the program, it was a year, right? When you were in it, it's now 6 months, right? And so because the challenge in the B2C space is a lot of people are used to people not delivering on what they say they're going to do. And so we had so many women who were like, before I commit a year, I need to see what this is like. And so our challenge internally was like, people kept saying they wanted a shorter program. So it's like, this from dealing with corporate, how the heck do I build a program where someone can come in the program and we can get them results in 6 months? Like that has been our challenge of like, how do we evolve how we do the program? And so for me, it's like, if I only have 6 months to work with you and you're trying to get to cash now, I need you to go to the market, right? I need you to go to the market. I need you to build relationships, because some people will wait 6 months and you still won't have a certification. You would have graduated out of the program and not had any results. And so my philosophy has been like, let me teach you the game, build relationships. And to your point, candidly, a lot of people don't need an enterprise client for your first consulting gig anyway. Like, no. You will hate consulting.
Yes, do not recommend.
Like, start with other businesses, or even if it's a smaller engagement, right, with an enterprise client. And then my thought is that once you've done it, because, and this from women in our program, like you could do multi 6 figures, even 7 figures without a certification, like, and learn and build your business. But to Desiree's point, I mean, people who are certified, I mean, you're talking about securing 7-8 figure opportunities. I'll share one story here. When I was at NMSDC, it blew my mind. There was a woman, a Latina-owned business out of San Antonio, where I live, San Antonio, Texas. And she specializes in recruitment and talent placement. And she secured a relationship with Toyota. And she was not prime, a sub on a contract with them. And so because she built the relationship for talent placement, she'd been working with them for like 5-10 years, had a great relationship. They offered her a prime contract to build like beds, truck beds. She was a talent company. And she was like, I don't know how to build truck beds, whatever, but they like paid and invested in her training and learning and awarded her this major contract. So it's like, when you're certified and you are really deeply seated with organizations and you do good work, like the opportunities are endless. Wow. But I also think you just have to be ready for that when it's time. And I'm like, if someone's coming in my sphere, I'm like, you got 6 months to a year. Let me teach you something else first.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for sharing that story, because I've never heard of that happening, but I'm not surprised, because there are so many small minority-owned businesses that don't have the infrastructure together. The business acumen is not there. For whatever reason, maybe the relationships, you just didn't get in and build the right relationships. So it's so hard for them to find, the ones that really gel with their culture and gel with the company. When they get you, they're just like, look, we want to feed you whatever we can, because it's basically a guaranteed ROI in their eyes. So that's
good
awesome.
help is hard to find. Like, even as a small business, I know that. You know what I mean? Like, when I'm trying to find vendors and contractors, finding legitimate small businesses that can do what they say they're going to do is hard to find. And so when corporations find that, they feed you.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So I love that.
I love that.
Listen, I'll put you on a whole different direction. But as we wrap up, like when you think about your journey and just the growth of your business, and another woman who's in the trenches, who's listening, anything we haven't talked about that you just like feel like, Liz, this is on my heart and I want them to hear or know? Anything that's like fairly unknown? Because sometimes in our space, I'm like, so many individuals aren't aware that this is what it really looks like.
I think we talked about a lot, but the biggest thing that I've experienced with women entrepreneurs, women-owned businesses, is really just, it's mindset issues. That is the core of it all. Like, having the fear, the imposter syndrome, just not being willing to take action. As soon as one thing goes bad, one project goes awry. That happened this year where we didn't fully meet expectations on a project, but sometimes the resources are the issue. Sometimes it's things that are not within your control. And so consulting can be really intimidating, but really the lessons are in the journey. Once I got once I got the contract that we got, I mean, it was great, but I'm working on my destination addiction where, you
Yeah.
don't even take time to like really bask in it and celebrate yourself. And you like, all right, what's next? So
Y'all heard it was like $250,000 big enterprise client. I was paying attention. I was going to coach you later. I was like, oh, so you just jumped from one to the
get me together, Liz. Get me together. But that's an issue. You really have to. I mean, you got to pay attention to who you are becoming as you're going through these really hard and unfamiliar situations. And that is what's going to carry you to the heights that you want to go. So, I mean, stop being afraid to invest in yourself. Stop being afraid to talk about your business. Ask for what you need. Don't be afraid to delegate. I wish I had have delegated sooner. I wish I had asked for help sooner. That's a huge issue. So, I mean, if anyone watches this episode and wants to slide in my DMs and ask me some questions, I'm more than happy to share whatever else they need. But I'm just really grateful to have met you at the time that I did in my life. I admire you deeply. And I see God has his hand on your business and on you and your team. And you are just going to do such amazing things because this is so deeply needed. And like you are just changing people's lives. So anything you need from me, I'm always going to support it because this is something that is going to impact. I can see it impacting millions. Like it's amazing what you're doing, Liz, and I'm so proud of
you. Thank you. That's exactly how I feel about you. It really is. I think I tease her because she's younger. I ain't gonna say no ages. I tease her because I'm like, oh my God. Like the things that you're doing at the time of life that you're doing them, I've said this. I'm like, girl, your future is way brighter than mine. Like, I'm so thankful. I'm be telling my daughters to look up to you and work for your firm. I'm like, go ahead. I know her. See if you can intern.
Yes. I love it.
So I'm like, I'm just so, I admire you. I'm inspired by you and your example. I thank you for that. And plug your business. So if someone's listening and they're like, wow, employer branding, that is something we need. Tell them who's the right client for you so they can slide in your DMs with some money.
Yes, please do. So we work with chief people officers, chief diversity officers. Our clients are people who are tasked with executing these very high stress, high priority DEI initiatives, maybe don't have all the resources they need to properly execute. So if you are wanting to launch a new talent initiative, you have one that's ongoing where it's not properly staffed with the people you need, we are the consultancy you want to reach out to. We consult across the 5 areas that most impact your employer brand. So we're looking at culture, employee experience, candidate experience, a company brand, as well as digital branding. So your messaging, your core messaging. So please do find us on LinkedIn. I'm Desiree Booker. Our company is called ColorVizion Lab on LinkedIn. We're also on Instagram, and you can also email us at info@colorvisionlab.com.
That's it. I know y'all got all these gems. Listen, this is the goals right here. Please connect with her. Spread the word. If you're working in corporate, make sure you spread the word and find her work. If you'd like more behind the scenes corporate conversations just like this one, be sure to subscribe on YouTube and listen on all your favorite streaming platforms. We'll see you there.